So there's this gap, right, in your understanding. I wish that I don't have the pro version. Unlucky. All right. So basically, there's a gap in your understanding, right? You have this tier of knowledge, and this tier of knowledge is probably like Diamond Plus. I'm not going to say Masters, but I'll say that you know some stuff that Diamonds use to win game, right? And then, some of your mechanics, I'd say your mechanics are probably like, you're not your mechanics in terms of like your aim, but the left clicking and the right clicking, the actual kind of management of your ammunition, it's probably around this range as well. We need to add in the actual melee right clicking, and when we're doing that, and it's going to become more effective once you learn how to manage high charge. But then there's this kind of gap in your understanding that spans between about plat and, I don't know, probably gold, right? So this big area is a question mark, right? And then you've got kind of the stuff that you do understand about what's going on in silver. So now one of the things that happens with this stuff is that in order to learn, right, learning is not a linear progression. I'm just going to do this in Paint, actually, right? Oh, I guess that works even better. So learning is not a linear progression, right? If you're talking about like SR over time, learning is not a linear progression. Like, this is just not how it works at all. Learning kind of looks like this. It kind of looks like that. So there's these... Who draws a question mark like this? I do, okay? So there's... Let's say, let's just pretend we're starting here, right? So this is where you're trying to kind of learn new things, right? So if we say number 1, this is like where you're learning new things. You're not climbing, you're not falling, you're just kind of learning, experimenting, looking for a thing or two here, but you don't really know what else you need to do in order to improve, but you're pretty comfortable with the level that you're at, right? And then once you've kind of learned, we'll call these kind of basic fundamentals. Basic fundamentals. Okay, so that says basic fundamentals, right? Now, what happens when you get to this point, right, is that there's always, anytime SVB, as a coach, will be able to back me up on this, right? But it's like, we'll say something to a student and be like, you need to do this, right? And then the problem is that none of the things that we're ever saying are rules or laws. It's like, this is what you should be doing, asterisk, most of the time. Or this is what you should be doing, but, right? But when we teach those things, the but or the you should be doing this when, except for, those are hard to like figure out and hard to coach. And you could kind of teach them the basic fundamentals, but then that person needs to actually integrate those new fundamentals into their play style. And this is the part where a student gets angry at a coach because they're like, I'm doing what you're telling me to do, but now I actually suck and I'm losing SR. But this is a very important part, is because your play is going to get worse when you start becoming less familiar with the things that you're doing. But you need to be able to kind of figure out what works, what doesn't work, why it works, why it doesn't work, when it works, when it doesn't work, these sort of things. So this is kind of a period of, you'd say, this is like, you could call this integration or experimentation. Because normally, like, if you don't have a coach, in here you have to experiment in order to discover the fundamentals for yourself. And then it decreases while you're kind of integrating these fundamentals, right? After that, 3 here is like the epiphany. I have figured out why what I'm doing was almost right, but actually harmful. And then this is, so integration, and then implementation of the new knowledge is where you go on this massive win streak up to the next point where those fundamentals are no longer necessary, and you need to start learning more advanced fundamentals, or whatever these things are, right? So, and then if you have a coach, they will help you kind of figure out what framework or fundamentals you need to evolve next. And then really, at that point, you'll be like, oh, but he said to do this at all points in time. And then you integrate. So it's kind of like, there's these periods. It's like, learn something new, fail terribly to integrate them, be like, oh, that's what they meant, and then implement them and climb, and then you'll hit a new kind of skill ceiling. And this is how climbing works. Now, the problem with you right now, is that we have this kind of thing, but you're using fundamentals from here when you're actually here. So this is how this relates to your gameplay, is that you are trying to implement fundamentals that are simply beyond your skill level, and they are not applicable, right? So now this can also... this also happens. People often kind of get stuck. The classic example that I always used was like flanking McCree or something like that. A flanking McCree at the lower ranks where there's really shit awareness and poor reaction time. If you high noon from behind them, you might get a 3K, right? And you might get to... I've seen people who are on McCree who just like shoot tanks, don't get a single elimination, walk around to the back line, high noon, 3K, I'm carrying, right? That might get you to plat. But you need to kind of unlearn that in order to get to diamond, because there's some fundamentals that might work. You know, there are, because this is not, it's not the same set of fundamentals. There's many different routes that you can use to climb. But some of these fundamentals can also be harmful. You know, they might work to get you to here, but you need to go back, unlearn this, relearn better ones that will be, because they are, you're building a pyramid, right? The fundamentals that we use here are required to put the next fundamentals on top of them. So you are missing like this entire strata of the pyramid, right? So one of the examples, if you want a practical example of what I mean by this, is that like you're talking like you're ult tracking. Now ult tracking is, it starts to, like plats do it, but they don't really do it. They kind of go through the motions of doing it. It's kind of like, like you know, when you're like, they've got, you know, if you've always heard the call, right? Where somebody's like, you know, they've got coalescence. And it's like, okay. But if you're making those calls and nothing is changing about your play style and your play, like, it's just kind of like they used coalescence and you just like pat yourself on the back. You're like, yep, I knew it. Like, the hell is the point? Congrats, you knew it. You know, congratulations. You were aware that they had coalescence. They have now used it and you have now lost, right? So it's like the ult tracking has to be for a point. It has to adjust how you play, how you counter them, or else there's not much point. And hello, SK, how are you doing? So what we kind of need to do is, like, you've got this kind of higher level knowledge, the shot calling, the ult tracking thing, but we have to kind of go down, or tier, or maybe two, to start building up these fundamentals that, you know, once you actually get to the point where this stuff that you're trying to do at this higher level matters, it's going to be like rocket ship, because you've already used to them, right? But we need to start building up these lower level fundamentals. So hearts to you too, SK. Hope you're having a fantastic day. So, yes. So we need to just, like, really start from, you know, fundamentals, from aiming to kind of... and the fundamental that we primarily want to use is bubbles. And then in order to actually be successful with your bubbles, one of the fundamentals that we need to, like, really work on, one of the largest bases of this pyramid, is just awareness. You need to be aware of not like what is going to happen in the next fight, just aware about what is happening in the present moment. And then, you know, predict at least a couple seconds into the future. And as you get better, you'll be able to predict more and more time into the future. But, all right. See, my drawings are always an absolute mess to interpret when they're complete. You have to see the drawings as they're being made. You have to see how the sausage gets made, or else you will never, ever understand any of my drawings ever.